Thanks, Mickey. Kurt Zimmerman, alcoholic. Ali, good to see you. Calvin, thank you very much for your message and the rest of the speakers. I was thinking about this because everybody's touched on one little theme that was, and Ali touched on it in the beginning, which I think is great. He said this book's, about this thick, but it has a depth to it that I think myself, there's a thing in Al-Anon, they say evolution and maturation towards wholeness. And Calvin talked about this is not a destination, it's a journey. And, one of the first things I'd like to say is, I always say this because I think it's crucially important for me, because it was the difference between night and day. I thank God I'm not suffering from what's not happening anymore. I thank God I'm not suffering from what's not happening anymore. I was such a victim of this delusion. My whole reality consisted of this illusion. I'm like the other speakers. I'm not Alcoholics Anonymous success story in the context of what we're going to talk about. I drank after 20 years. I came in 1979. I'm also, we'll say, I remember Don Pritz saying this one time to me. He said, "I'm not an ex-convict. I'm a man who's been to prison." Another thing he said to me, what was really, really crucial, I didn't get it back then, was he said, "You're special. You're just not extra special." And, I had no idea how to understand that statement back then. So how I got on this path and into this big book was I was introduced to a guy in 1986. I heard him speak at a podium, and his message was completely different than what I'd been hearing in meetings. It was completely different. And it was almost controversial. And, basically what happened is I was too intimidated to ask him to take me through the steps or sponsor me. So I had a friend ask him. And he just happened to have an opening, and that's how the path started. I went to his house. I drove to Santa Monica twice a week. And what was fascinating about this was this guy asked me questions that I couldn't come up with. I was asking all the wrong questions, because I was asking all the questions from the problem, not the solution. And the problem can never see the problem. Don C., who's helped me tremendously in the last 12 years, well, really 25 years, he said something to me one time. He said, "You don't know what you don't know until you know it." And part of the process of finding out I was alcoholic, that was revelatory, because I thought I was doing something wrong. I kept drinking, and I'd go to meetings, and I couldn't quit drinking. And I thought, because I kept drinking, I thought that I was making wrong decisions. I thought that I just thought I was doing something wrong because I couldn't do what everybody else was doing. So one of the things this guy said was, he said from the podium, he poo-pooed the thing, "Just don't drink." He said, "If I could just not drink, I wouldn't be here." And that caught my attention. See, it caught my attention. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. See, I didn't know I was driven to drink. I didn't know that drinking was not an act of volition. That once I started drinking, I found out I had an allergy. That allergy manifested in a way that looked like this. It looked like one drink led to 2 drinks, to 3 drinks, to whatever. Now, I thought that was a cop-out when I first heard that. I thought, oh, that's just such a cop-out. But then when I started reading the doctor's opinion with this guy, it started to reveal to me information about the condition that I was up against, and it identified the condition. And then I got to that point at page 23, it said, well, all this stuff we looked at be academic and pointless if you never took the first drink. Just don't drink. And it said, because there you have an obsession of the mind that will talk to you and convince you to pick up a drink when you're sober. And so this information was crucial. It was really crucial because I'm one of those people that I think the big book defined it quite well. I'm a real alcoholic, an alcoholic who crossed some line where I lost the power to choose whether I drink or not. That means I don't get a say in it. And the condition that I suffer from, I have to be released from. Now, this is where the steps came in. This is where the revelatory awakenings come in. This is where the process comes in. So it was described to me like this. The guy said to me, he said, look, it's kind of like this, Kurt. We're gonna, it's like baking a cake. He said, there's a recipe for that. He said, that's how the big book's laid out. He said, and it's going to tell you exactly what to do. It's going to tell you exactly what ingredients to put in. And he said, if you want to alter that recipe, you're not going to get the same cake. You think maybe a few more eggs would be good, throw them in, that's great. Maybe a little more flour, maybe you like butter, you're not going to get the same cake. So he was using metaphor to kind of point to what this path was about, because I didn't know. I hadn't been down the path, right? So I don't know. I don't have a clue. So basically what happened was he said, you know, once you put the ingredients in this cake, he said, you're going to put it in the oven. He said, one of the things you're going to do when you put it in the oven, you're not going to keep opening the door and checking on it. Well, I did that through inventory. I did it through, you know, he said, you're not going to do that. You're going to leave the door shut. So metaphorically, that's the best way to describe this path, okay? So I did what was prescribed. I went and make amends. I was released. I think it was talked about earlier, you know, I didn't surrender, I was surrendered. There's a poet from the 1800s, is Jose Gossett. He says, the only genuine ideas are the ideas of the shipwrecked. All the rest is rhetoric, posturing, and farce. That was the awakening. The awakening was seeing that it was the first step for me. It was a process that described the conditions that happened to me in the first step. That's what happened to me in those first 43 pages of the book. So that collapse caused Bill had a revelatory experience, a spiritual awakening. That collapse caused a revelatory experience. It released me. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I can just tell you that when that happened, I knew things I didn't know. I came to believe. It was something that happened to me, not by me. And when I say came to believe, I don't mean a belief system. I mean gnosis, or knowing. And I would say that would be faith. And the way I describe faith is a modality of perception that gives reality to this great mystery. I can also describe it in another way, the way our book talks about it. It talks about it, we agnostics. And I think it's overlooked a lot. It says faith's been involved all along. Without knowing it, you've been brought here by a certain kind of faith. What was that? Well, the book says it was a God of reason. So I had faith the whole time. It's just I had faith in my thinking, my perceptual reality through my head. And somebody had mentioned it. There's another part of the book says, well, that's the problem, because it says the main problem centers in the mind. See, I can't fix my mind with my mind. So when Ali said there's a depth to this thing, I really, really think, we read it a lot in A Vision for You. It says we realize we only know a little. God will constantly disclose more to us, right? Doesn't mean I don't know anything. What it means to me is that I realize that the depth of this is way, way, way bigger than I thought it was. And that's been my experience here since 1979. So when I drank at 20 years, I thought, I had a narrative that created a story about what that was about. It was completely false because it was coming from the condition that was driving the narrative. I failed, you blew it, you've ruined everything, da 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 da. Same narrative we come in with if, say, you don't drink after 20 years. Same voice. Same voice. And what happened was I got released again 12 years ago. And thank God I had people that could point me in the direction that this thing was really going. And those people were people that were grounded in the big book. They were people that saw that the big book was the menu, not the meal. It doesn't negate the fact that the big book is a sound spiritual process with 12 steps. It's sound. I mean, look at Ali talked about it, 80 plus years. Look at the people it's affected in multiple fellowships. So I really, I'm a student of this thing. I love to get into the depth of it. Now I read it more descriptively than I do instructively. And what I mean by that is when I read, when you sincerely take a position, it looks like this, and then it gives you the promises. Oh.
Kurt, would you turn off your video, brother? You just froze for a second there. I'm going to stop your video to give you a...
So where'd I leave off?
It's descriptive now. How you read it, read the book is descriptive.
It's descriptive. So I mean that by when it says we sincerely took a position, it looks like what? The promises. When we enter the world of the spirit, it looks like what? The promises. I can comprehend the word serenity. I know peace. I know how to handle situations used to baffle me. Right? So it's very descriptive. If I've never entered the world of the spirit, how do I know what it is? So it's instructive and descriptive. It's a deep spiritual text. I think it was a download. I think Bill got a download. That's what I think. Whether you think that or not, that's totally up to you. I don't know how someone with 4 years sobriety can write such a spiritual text. I just don't know how that's possible. And I know there were a lot of factors involved with William James, with Carl Jung, with Parkhurst, with the history and that, but I really believe that. And so as I I went through this process. Like I said, I made amends. I went back to prison. I ended up speaking at the prison I was in. I made amends to, then I got the accoutrements of AA. I started a business. I got married. I had kids. We were an AA couple. We were involved. And then what happened was something I see a lot. It was like I worked the first 9 steps and kind of gradually forgot about 10 and 11. I was doing 12. And, I got busy with work and got a lot, started making money, bought a boat, bought a car, bought a house, bought another car. And before I knew it, there was a lot of mental anxiety. I used to call it fear. It's not fear, it's mental anxiety. And the lights started to dim. I was getting angrier. Anything could trigger me. And I went up to a buddy's house one night and had no thought of drinking for 19 years. Had no thought of it. And there was a glass of beer on the table, had a little foam top on it. And the thought came into my mind to say, I think I'll have one. And when the thought comes into an alcoholic's mind that says he's going to have one, he has one. And no effective mental defense. And I drank that glass of beer, and the thought came into my mind again to have another one. And I had 4 glasses of beer, and I left, and thought came in and said, well, that wasn't so bad. Within a month, I was drinking a quart of vodka a day, and I'd completely wrecked my life. And so, it says irritable, restless, and discontent. That's a sober state. It's a sober state. Here's what it did. This is exactly, I'll tell you what it did. See, if this was let's say, chilled gray goose on ice, it would look like this. I can do this. That's what it does. It relieves that irritable, restless discontentness that I'm experiencing internally. Calvin said it. It was the solution to a problem of seeming separation. So this whole thing took off like wildfire, just like the book said, just like the guy quit 25 years, he was dead within 4 years. Well, I'd have never made it 4 years. 5150 twice, sent to treatment centers. I could not get released. So why am I sitting here? This is what does this thing give us? The best I've ever heard it described. What does this give us? This program. It gives us what we already have. And it removes what was never there. I was a victim of a delusion that I could rest satisfaction if I managed well. And I thought maybe I'd do that with spiritual principles. It didn't work. Managing my life with spiritual principles did not work. I was still managing. This was about a surrender to this great mystery. That's what it was about. And somewhere I missed that. And this thing goes like this. What I really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the conscious awareness of what I just said. It takes the weight off. What I really have, emphasis on really. Now, I might accumulate quite a few days and quite a few years on that daily reprieve, but that's what I really have. And if I looked at the screen here and I looked at everybody in here and I said, well, Allie has, I don't know how many years, but just use an example, 15 years, and Rachel has 20 years, and Kingsley has 30 years. What I'm describing is separation. But if I said every one of us on these screens has a daily reprieve, I'm describing inclusiveness, where we're all on the same place. The very thing I needed when I came back was the very thing that was withheld from me in AA. I needed compassion and understanding about the condition I had. There was a lot of misunderstanding. There was a lot of shame and guilt thrown around. See, there was a lot of that. Now I know, because I've been around here long enough, well, you didn't go to enough meetings, or you didn't do this, you didn't do that. See, no, everybody's timing's different with this thing. Everybody's path's different with this thing. You know, God uses what's available, and that's just exactly what happened with me. I have a tremendous, tremendous sense of gratitude. My life's been saved. A tremendous sense of gratitude. Every morning I wake up. I used to wake up and go, what's going to happen today? I wake up now and I go, what is going to happen today, with excitement? It's a different perception, same environment. Somebody had talked about it earlier, about this is what this is. So that, you know, I'll tell you, there was a guy, Nate. Nate's been around a long time. Nate's never gotten sober, though, on and off, 30 years maybe, old buddy of mine, great guy, got a heart of gold. He said something to me one time, it really made a lot of sense. He said, you know, when I fit AA into my life, it never worked. He said, but when I fit my life into AA, it seems to work. And, you know, out of the mouths of babes, right? I mean, here's a guy who couldn't get sober. And, you know, another thing, I keep thinking of, because you mentioned Don, I think, you know, he'd drop just little things, you know, he'd say, like, you know, he said, Kurt, you need to listen. He said, because a liar can tell you the truth. He would just drop little things like that. You need to listen. You need to pay attention. So I think this process, you know, I think of some of the stuff in the fifth step where it says the exact nature of the wrongs. My first pass through this, I wasn't talking about the nature of the wrongs. I was talking about the wrongs. I didn't have a clue what the nature was. The nature is this condition of self that's driving me, that I'm identified as. And it says it in our right before our third step. In fact, it mentions it even in we agnostics. It says, when I became alcoholic, crushed by a self-imposed crisis. That's not a crisis I caused. That's the imposition of self that's driving me. That's why I drank in the first place. It's how I became alcoholic. This condition. I'm not the condition. I'm here to tell you that. Right before the third step, it says this. It says, being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what defeated us. We're the us. But my first 19 years, I was trying to be free from self as self. That was the difference. Not from this thing. And it even said, God makes that possible. We couldn't be entirely free. God makes that possible. Well, I'm sorry, I'm reading this way. It says that implies we can be entirely free of this condition. It mentions God as you understand him. I heard when I first got here, you can't understand God. It's not what it says. It says you can have an understanding of God. What does that mean? To me, it means that there is a knowing, a gnosis, that will allow you to see and understand with clarity those kind of mysteries. What does it look like? Well, God of my understanding is I can comprehend the word serenity. I didn't do that. I know what that peace is. There's so many things that this thing can reveal. And it's like the parting of a veil. And when I say knowing, I'm not talking about thinking. I'm talking about gnosis. I'm talking about the sixth sense. I'm talking about this awareness is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. This is what I'm trying to speak about, which is very difficult to speak about because it's experiential. That thing is experiential. I love that. I think it was always mentioned about the main problem centers in the mind. I didn't know that I had a narrative that created a story. That story created mental anxiety. It was rooted in the future or the past. And I was never present. I was always present, but the conceptual overlays of that story kept me from being present. Because I was way over here, way over there, remorse, self-pity, morbid reflection. And a lot of this is addressed in 11. I mean, 11, when it says, we ask God to direct our thinking, divorce it from self-pity. Self-pity to me is in the past. Dishonest, what does that mean? Dishonest means when I'm in the past or the future, I can't see with clarity presently. I'm seeing dishonestly. I'm not seeing truthfully. And then it says self-seeking. Well, that's the future. So what I'm asking for is God direct my thinking, divorce from self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking. When I'm asking for that, that's a prayer. I'm asking for my thought life to be placed on a higher plane. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about seeing, not thinking. I'm talking about a sixth sense they talk about. We intuitively know how to handle situations. This isn't a reactive state. This is a responsive state from a position of neutrality that I've been placed in because I've fulfilled the conditions of the first 9 steps. It's very, very descriptive. So what do we do with this? What do I do with this? It was mentioned, I think all the speakers mentioned it. This is a way of integrating spiritual principles in our life so we can move through the world with effectiveness and understanding and compassion, love, tolerance. We just happen to have the gift of alcoholism. And that gift is crucial to those who are still suffering. Because like Calvin said, I love the story. I love the story about to show you where the rocks are. It's so, I mean, it just fits the picture, right? Got it. Thanks, you guys. It's like, it's almost, I think of the Wizard of Oz, I think of the Wizard of Oz, she had the slippers on the whole time. I'm like, it was like, oh my God, like everything I was looking for, I was looking with. I didn't even know it. This is that's what's revealed for me. That was what was revealed for me. And if I had to drink for after 20 years to find that, so be it. You know, I'll share this little experience. You know, Don C was really crucial in helping me. And, you know, my former wife had left me. The alcoholism in the family, just, she couldn't do it anymore. She's still sober. She's 36 years sober, just celebrated 36 years. And I remember getting divorce papers, lighting them on fire in the kitchen, dropping them on the floor. And I remember going down to a divorce attorney down in Newport Beach, and I was drinking in a little cove back there. And of course, Coyas called me. You know, it was one of those synchronicities, those coincidences that happen around here. He just called. He's always on time, you know. And he's had a little conversation with me about how's it working. I said, it's working pretty good. I just started drinking again, so just bear with me. And he asked me a question. He said, 1986, when you took the third step, were you serious? I said, I couldn't have been more serious. I was involved in the steps. I was working. He said, well, I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to understand it. And it seemed like it was about a 5-minute pause, probably a minute. He said, all of this is part of that decision. And that just went right over my head. I didn't understand it till I got released 12 years ago. And here's what I want to say. See, I was focusing on, oh, you mean drinking is part of that? No, that's not what he was saying. What he was saying was that this pattern of reality, this path we're on, goes like this. And I pulled one point out, the drinking, and focused on it. This was part of the decision. You get off track, you get on track. You get off track, you get on track. What that drinking did was it took me to a deeper surrender. It revealed to me what it wasn't for 19 years. And it allowed me to access something that I hadn't accessed before. And I'm eternally grateful for that. And I'm really, really honored that Ali asked me to be a part of this. Because I do believe that, you know, somebody mentioned it, this AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, that was our book long before the fellowship. And I think sometimes I did it, you know, I thought the answers were in meetings, and they were, but there was a depth working one-on-one with somebody that I couldn't have reached in meetings. And I'm really grateful for those people. So thanks for letting me share, Ali.